We knew Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto would start the first two games of the season in Korea. We now know which order, and we have a hint that they might be the same order when the Dodgers come back to the U.S. to play the Cardinals. We'll dig into that, plus more Gavin Lux talk and some intrigue up in the Bay Area with J.D. Davis. Could he be a fit for the Dodgers? Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, the show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. If you're new here, my name is Jeff Snyder. My co-host next to me, that guy is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like a lot of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase lockedonmlb for a first deposit match up to $100. And Vince, we've known Dave Roberts told us a couple weeks ago that it was a safe bet that Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto would start the two games against the Padres in Korea. Neither guy got hurt between now and then. And so that safe bet became an official announcement on Monday, with Tyler Glasnow getting the opener and Yamamoto getting game two. And Roberts also said it's likely that they will go in that same order when the Dodgers come to the U.S. to start with their home opener against the Cardinals on March 28th, which would put Glasnow starting the home opener, Yamamoto game two, and then probably Bobby Miller on Freddie Freeman bobblehead night that Saturday. Were you, I guess, any surprise there that it's Glasnow than Yamamoto?
I expected it to be that way. I know, one guy got paid more than the other, and maybe that could have been the reason to flip them. But realistically, for me, that makes sense. I mean, Glasnow hasn't been talked about as much, I think, as Yamamoto, just because, the nature of him coming over from Japan, plus the big money and everything else. But Glasnow stuff is nasty. He is an ace. And he's been an ace for the Rays. He's been a game one starter in the postseason. It just hasn't worked out in the sense of him really competing for a Cy Young or anything because of the innings. But yeah, he's a number one guy.
Yeah, for me last week when we saw that Glasnow pitched a B game the same day that Yamamoto pitched for the Dodgers, realizing that they were throwing the same day and knowing that Yamamoto is probably on a little bit longer rest schedule, it made sense that, we said it then, that probably means Glasnow's getting game one because they will be lined up. I would guess that there's, we know that Glasnow is pitching. I think Glasnow is pitching on Tuesday for the Dodgers. I haven't seen if Yamamoto is scheduled for another start for the Dodger, if he's going to do a B game or a live BP or something. But yeah, they both line up to start that way. For me, the more interesting part was whether they would keep that same order or give both of those guys a couple extra days rest when they came back to the United States and let Bobby Miller have the home opener. Obviously, Miller's performance on Monday didn't scream, I deserve to start the home opener, but one bad game wasn't going to change any plans, but it seems like the plan is just to stick with Glasnow and Yamamoto and probably go with Miller in game three. And then, James Paxton game four and, probably Gavin Stone in game five and just go that route. Were you surprised at all that they're sticking with those same two? So basically the first four games of the season will be started by two guys.
I'm not. I mean, I figured that's what it was going to be. There was no real reason to go the other way other than if you wanted to get those guys a couple of extra days rest to start the season. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Either way they would have done it, it would have been okay. But I think this kind of makes sense. We also found out that, people got a little bit concerned. James Paxton is not traveling to Korea, but it's not because of anything more than he's not going to pitch out there. He's not going to pitch in any of the exhibition games. He's not going to, he's not set up to pitch in any of the actual games. So the Dodgers are leaving him here. It's not a matter of anything else more than that. Some of the other younger guys are going. Stone and Grover both going, whether it's to pitch in exhibition games or be available in a relief role if they are needed in the regular game. So, just to clear that up for anybody that did read that news.
Yeah, like we talked about yesterday, it's really going to be interesting to see how it's almost like a short playoff series roster, this 2-game series, knowing that it's not like they technically have a different roster, but you can, option guys and send guys down. And so it will be interesting to see what they do with the roster. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense for Paxton to fly halfway around the world to watch baseball when he can watch at home on TV, especially like we Dodger fans are still a little sensitive going back to, the Clayton Kershaw's injury history started flying to Australia and back in 2014. And, he still was elite that year. That was the year he won the MVP after missing a couple of weeks of the season. But, then he was healthy in 2015 and then hasn't basically pitched a full season since then. And it's not like it's all been the back issues, but that was the beginning of a long and still excellent end for Clayton Kershaw. But, it changed the course of his career. And, he could have just easily tweaked his back on a 4-hour flight to New York, I guess. But, something about those long flights, I'm in favor of, as exciting as this career series is, I'm really, really nervous about these flights for some of these players.
Yeah, the Dave Roberts had mentioned that they're going to have a sleep specialist in there, which isn't necessarily the issue if there was one to arise. If you get jet lagged or whatever, that's just a matter of you'll figure it out in a couple of days. That's why they're leaving so early, having those exhibition games in order for this to kind of go through. But yeah, when the possibility of even like me going for work was up, and I was like, do I really want to go on a flight that long to watch the Dodgers? And ultimately, I would have done it, but it wasn't in the cards for it this year. But yeah, it's a lot. And Mookie talked about it on his podcast about he's a guy that can't stay still for very long, so he was very concerned about this flight and what he was going to do. So if they're concerned about it, you can imagine anybody else is concerned.
Yeah. So. Fingers crossed that there aren't any major issues, but yeah, I'm totally on board with Paxton skipping it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Blake Trinan, we talked about yesterday, it seems like maybe the first thing you do after having a bruised lung shouldn't be sitting on an airplane for 20 hours or whatever it is. And so, maybe Trinan misses a series because of that. We know Gratterall's not going on the trip because of injury. So we'll see, but they are playing exhibition games. They do need pitchers. They do need guys, even guys who aren't necessarily going to be on the roster for the 2 games against the Padres. So, fingers crossed, really. Dodgers don't have the youngest team, and, it's so scary to see, just to think about somebody getting hurt just sitting on a plane for too long. But one young player they do have is Gavin Lux. We've talked a lot about Gavin Lux lately. Unfortunately, on Monday, he gave us some more to talk about. We'll dig into his continued struggles, how we got here, ideas for how to help him get better. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's the tournament season or the fight for the playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And if basketball is not your thing, you only care about baseball, like me, there's plenty of baseball options there on PrizePicks that you can look at. One of the fun things I've been looking at is the over-unders on home runs. All you do on PrizePicks, you just choose more or less on a stat. You don't have to get too complicated. And if you're right, then you win. And if you combine those, you get several right. That increases how much you can win. And so I was looking at the over-under numbers for the home runs and thinking, who would I maybe take the under on? And one to me is Vlad Guerrero Jr. His over under is 33.5. He's only hit more than that one time. That was 2021 when he hit 48 home runs. But last year he hit 26. Year before that it was 32. And so, he might be one to think about taking the under on. Corey Seager, 29 and a half. He's hit 33 each of the last 2 years, but Seager's not traditionally necessarily a power hitter, so he might be one you want to think about. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you how to make your picks, but you can go to PrizePicks and you can select these things, and it's a good way to make some money with your fantasy sports action. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks using code LOCKEDONMLB, a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Hey, we're back. Well, thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Especially want to thank our everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning, and you can tell your friends and family about us. They can become everydayers too. We love talking Dodgers with you. We are 2 weeks away now from our 5-year anniversary of doing this show, and we've never missed a weekday, and we don't plan on starting anytime soon. So thanks to our everydayers. You can also become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. It's a text message based service where we text out our thoughts on news, rumors, all that stuff. You can text back and forth with us in one-on-one conversations. We have a lot of fun there. So become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you everything you need to know about the world of sports or the world of Los Angeles sports, whichever you prefer. So check those out. And Vince, Gavin Lux is, he's been one of the main topics of conversation the last several days. And we, on Monday, the Dodgers played against the Guardians, and unfortunately, Lux didn't do anything to make those concerns any less. In the first inning, he made a throwing error, led to an unearned run against Bobby Miller. And then later in the game, there was a pop-up in the infield that dropped between him and Chris Taylor, but closer to him. Later in the game after that, he struck out on a pitch clock violation. So it was 0-2, and then he didn't get back in the box in time. So he struck out on that. Just a rough day all around for Gavin Lux. I guess in the Lux defense category, I don't know if we should use Lux and defense in the same sentence, but here we are. The pop-up in the infield, if it had been anybody other than Gavin Lux, people would be correctly saying shortstop's got to take control on that ball. Shortstop's captain of the infield. Chris Taylor, either one of them could have caught it. And if you're a shortstop and you can catch a ball, you should catch it. But because it was Lux, I think it was just, there's another thing that Lux is struggling with, because it was an easier catch for him. And, if you don't hear yourself being called off on a ball you can easily catch, you should catch it. But, it is the shortstop's job to do that. And then the pitch clock violation, if it was anybody other than Gavin Lux, we wouldn't even remember that it happened. It would have been an oddity. Oh, yeah, I guess somebody struck on a pitch clock violation. Hope he doesn't do that when the games count. But because it was the third thing for Lux in this game, it just kind of added on. Really, the concern for me is the bad throw again.
Yep. And everything else that comes with it, it's hard to defend Lux's throwing anymore. There's no really defense for it. Would Freddie Freeman have been pulled off the bag if it was him? Like, it didn't matter, because it's a normal throw that should be hitting him in the chest, across the Dodgers sign. So there's really no other thing there. But what we didn't really get to unpack in terms of the Lux news yesterday, just because there was so much other stuff, is a lot of like how we got here and how a lot of fans, some of the gripes towards Lux have some, loaded thoughts behind it, which aren't fair to Lux specifically, or, maybe even the Dodgers specifically in certain points. Whereas, I saw a lot of the Dodgers really let Seager and Trey Turner go with no plan, or, a lot of other stuff. And for me, it's one of those where we've talked about this with a lot of guys, with Rendon, with Bryce Harper, with Garrett Cole. Like, everything that's happened to this point, gives us the roster we have now. You can't go back and say, if they had Seager, then they would also have the roster they have now. And if you think, a roster with Seager, but maybe no Yamamoto is better. You're definitely inclined to think that if you believe that a roster with Trey Turner is better than one with Glasnow and somebody else or whoever else, or potentially Ohtani, you're able to think that as well. But to put it all in one box is a little bit unfair for the Dodgers not having a contingency plan necessarily. Or was Mookie Betts a contingency plan the whole time if Lux didn't work out in terms of defense or getting back from injury? That all is fair in a sense. They did ramp up there up the middle prospect-wise a little bit. Guys that can at least field if they can't hit, if anything, at shortstop this offseason. So they did, improve that in a little bit. But, there's just a lot of anger from everything's happening when it's a matter of you can't necessarily predict Lux would be this bad. Even in your doomsday scenario, I don't know if it looks as bad as it's looked this spring.
Yeah, Lux has never looked as bad. Throwing has always been an issue with Lux, but never to this extent. And, if you did guess that he was going to just completely forget how to throw it all, you're probably too pessimistic for your own good, even if you did happen to be right this time. There's so much there. I do think we as Dodger fans are a little bit spoiled, and it lends itself to a little bit of hyperbole. We saw it again in our YouTube comments the other day. Somebody saying that a little league manager could win 100 games with his Dodgers team, and Dave Roberts is the worst manager in the world. And the fact is, we've seen Buck Showalter in New York couldn't win 100 games with a packed team. There's so many examples. Bob Melvin in San Diego. Before that, JC Tingley in San Diego. There's plenty of examples of managers with stacked teams who haven't had the success the Dodgers have had. And yes, I get it. If you believe the postseason is a different animal, and that there's something inherent in Dave Roberts that makes you think that he can't win in the postseason. Okay, I disagree with you, but that's okay. But the fact is, if the Dodgers had another manager, there's no guarantee they make it to the postseason all these years. Dave Roberts is a really good manager. And we're seeing the same thing here with, people being so hard on the Dodgers for letting Corey Seager go when he was probably going to go. He probably wanted to go. Trey Turner was never going to re-sign with the Dodgers. You can only re-sign a guy who wants to re-sign with you. And, oh, by the way, the Dodgers do have one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball on their team right now. And so worst case scenario is they say, okay, Miguel Rojas, our starting shortstop last year when we won 100 games, you're our starting shortstop again. That's okay. And I think it makes sense for the Dodgers to give Lux every opportunity. We saw our buddy Craig in the YouTube comments today said that Lux needs to be sent to AAA right now. And I told him in the comments that, well, minor league spring training games aren't any less meaningless than major league spring training games. It's spring training. It's the time to figure things out. Now, yeah, if Gavin Lux at some point when the games start counting, and maybe that's game one, if he hasn't figured it out by then, maybe he doesn't play. Maybe it's game 10 or maybe it's game 50. At some point, if Lux doesn't figure out, they may have to send him down to the minors or look at trading him or something. But the whole point of spring training is to train in the spring, getting ready for opening day. I mean, it's not even spring yet. It's March 11th. Spring hasn't even started yet. Like spring training has. One of my favorite things about baseball is that spring training takes place entirely in the winter, and the winter meetings take place in the fall. And, the Midsummer Classic takes place 2 weeks after summer starts. We're not good with seasons in baseball, but the fact is it's still spring training. The games are still 100% meaningless. And Gavin Lux making a throwing error on March 11th doesn't matter at all, except as it relates to, is he going to keep making those errors on March 20th or 21st, whenever the games start counting, and then March 28th, when all the games count from then on. That's the question. And, that's what the Dodgers are trying to figure out. And Dave Roberts did look fed up after that pop-up that dropped between Lux and Taylor. Couldn't tell if it was directed at Lux or just general, come on, guys. But it's it's the whole point of spring training, and they're going to figure it out. And the Dodgers are a really smart team. And so they're not going to let Gavin Lux's throwing issues derail their season. It's the only question is, will he get it figured out? And if not, will they let it derail a game or two here or there?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of people blaming Dave Roberts for like the move Mookie to short and everything else. Dave Roberts didn't make that decision. It was a collective decision made by the front office and Dave Roberts or whoever
And
his
Mookie
idea.
Betts.
Yeah, whoever his original idea was. But for Lux, I think them moving him, out of shortstop, kind of, some people, there are people on the other side of this that say they moved Lux too early or panicked or whatever the case is. I don't feel that strongly about it. I do think it was something that had to be done, and they did it maybe a little bit quicker than I thought. But I think with the fact that they moved him over to second, the fact that they added the platoon in there, like they're setting it up to, if Lux doesn't get this right in the first couple weeks, he could get sent down or he could get moved to a bench role and where he just pinch hits. Like, I think that is all set up to be there. I don't think they're going to allow this to, kind of play out the way we thought, where you get a month or so to kind of figure it out. I do think they'll be more swift in that movement if they need to.
Yeah. And the good news is, if it is all mental, it could be completely resolved tomorrow. It could just be something like that. I think I've told the story on this show before. My son got the yips a few years ago after he was pitching and he took a comebacker off his throwing hand. And after that, he had trouble throwing, not physically, but just mentally. Like it was everything about gripping a baseball. He just was thinking way too hard about it and couldn't make good throws. And I went out in the backyard with him one day to play catch. And right as we were about to start, I asked him about some girl that, he had mentioned thinking was cute. And, he got embarrassed and we're talking and he's like, "Dad, you're such an idiot," And after about 10 throws, I said, "Hey, did you notice that you're throwing just fine right now?" And it was just getting him to totally not think about throwing a baseball. And for a 13-year-old boy, that was, let's talk about girls and with because that's what every 13-year-old boy wants to do with his dad. And that got his mind off it, and that completely resolved his throwing issues. Obviously, it's not that easy with Gavin Lux, but I do think it's going to be something like that where a switch will flip at some point and he will be fine. The question is, will that be this week or will that be in 6 months? And do the Dodgers have time to wait? So we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about another infielder up in San Francisco. JD Davis is being released by the Giants. There's some drama there. We'll talk about the drama and we'll talk about whether he could be a fit for the Dodgers. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences of smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And I've told you before, these Fire TV sticks are awesome. They're small. They're easy to take with you. We use it all the time in our Suburban. The boys can watch Netflix or baseball games or whatever when we're on road trips. We can then take it into the hotel with us, plug it into the hotel TV. It's super convenient. And, it's really, even the hotels that you have to sign in and everything, Fire TV works with those. So super nice, really convenient. And Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Here we're back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Especially again, want to thank our everydayers. You can become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. And you can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels over on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. And last topic for today, Vince, the Giants are releasing JD Davis, who has been their third baseman the last 2 years or year and a half. They traded for him at the trade deadline in 2022. He was basically their primary third baseman last year, had 546 plate appearances, and most of them came at third base. and he was solid. He had a 103 OPS plus. His career OPS plus is 113, so it was a down year by his standards, but he's been pretty good. And he will now be a free agent. And there is a little bit of drama there because he went to arbitration with the Giants, and there's a little loophole in the CBA that if you go to an arbitration hearing, your contract is not guaranteed. And so by releasing him now, the Giants only have to pay him 30 days of termination pay, which equals, a little over $1 million. If they had waited 2 more days to release him, it would have been 45 days. So they're saving about, $500,000 or so by releasing him now. And his agent isn't happy about that. And one of the interesting things about this is the clause in the CBA. I'm just going to read it. It says, a player whose contract is terminated by a club under paragraph whatever of the uniform players contract for failure to exhibit sufficient skill or competitive ability shall be entitled to receive termination pay from the club in an amount equal to 30 days payment at the rate stipulated in paragraph 2 of his contract if the termination occurs during spring training, but on or before the 16th day prior to the start of the championship season. All that means to say is what I said, that he's entitled 30 days compensation pay. But the interesting part is it says if his contract is terminated for failure to exhibit sufficient skill or competitive ability. I think he's got a pretty decent case that that's not why the Giants terminated his contract. The Giants terminated his contract because they signed Matt Chapman, and they don't need a third baseman anymore. But he's batting 400 this spring. He, like I said, he was above average offensively last year. I think he has a pretty good grievance there to say, look, you guys owe me the whole $6.9 million that we agreed to because you didn't release me for failure to exhibit sufficient skill or competitive ability. You released me because you like somebody more. And like somebody more is not an acceptable reason in the CBA. Obviously, teams can release guys anytime they want. But if the CBA specifically says you owe me my guaranteed money unless I'm released for failure to exhibit sufficient skill, I think he's got a grievance there, Vince.
Yeah, you're more in tune with this stuff than I am, but if laid out as easily as you just laid it out, it does seem to be interesting. It does seem, one could say shady on the Giants' part if they end up going through with this. The fact that the agent was so upset means that, I'm sure the Players Association might step in here and say something at some point if they deem it necessary. And yeah, all in all, it doesn't necessarily affect the Dodgers. It's just one of those loopholes that, honestly, that the Dodgers haven't used yet. Is probably more so that they have done right for the most part by a lot of their guys when they either get better talent or they're not playing as much or having a role that they maybe should have. So at least props to the Dodgers for that.
Yeah, and where it could affect the Dodgers is, we're talking about Gavin Lux and his struggles. JD Davis plays third base. Max Muncy, the Dodgers' current third baseman, has previously played second base. It's not the craziest idea in the world for the Dodgers to look into signing JD Davis to be their third baseman, move Muncy back to second base, leave Mookie at shortstop. Muncy probably wouldn't have the range that Lux has at second base, but you do think he would probably make better throws, at least right at this point. I throw this out here as a possibility, even though as I'm saying it, I have a hard time seeing any chance of that happening, even though you can make the pieces make sense. But I guess for me, it boils down to, I don't know that JD Davis is enough of an upgrade or a good enough hitter to make it worth taking that route.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If it was Nolan Arenado, then yeah, you put Nolan Arenado at third base and you move Max Muncy second, and you'll take a few extra base hits here and there in the regular season. And if it's that bad, then you can make decisions, later on, if you need to. But yeah, for JD Davis, I mean, the Dodgers have, Kike has struggled when he's had full-time roles before. But, he is a guy that can perform, 103 OPS realistically if given, especially coming off the surgery he had in the offseason, and if he's fully healthy or whatever the case is. Miguel Rojas Probably not. He was a 66 OPS plus last year, but he was like around 100 or 105, I think, the last part of the season, last month and a half of the season, which again, that's a small sample, but it was big enough to warrant that he could do this. And he's done it at least one time in the past where he's been pretty good. So yeah, I think this opens up the thoughts for us of, okay, they don't need to just acquire a shortstop. They could, in theory, require a third baseman. And if it's somebody that's a big enough upgrade, Max Muncy can shoot over second, and they'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah, if they do need to replace Lux, they could get a second baseman, a third baseman, or a shortstop, and theoretically replace him that way, one way or the other. One thing that JD Davis is a right-handed hitter, and he has almost identical splits against righties and lefties, and so he would kind of balance out the lineup a little bit there. But balancing the lineup isn't as important as dominating. And I think if you were going to take a offensive downgrade, you might as well just go all the way to Miguel Rojas and with the elite defense rather than Davis's questionable defensively and not a good enough hitter to make up for it. So, but it was worth talking about, and it does. You mentioned Nolan Arenado. If the Cardinals decide to blow things up at some point, Arenado could be on the trade block, and we know he'd love to come to the Dodgers. There's all these options out there, and as a Dodgers fan, for me, I've seen the Dodgers front office come through enough times that I trust them to do whatever is going to be necessary. And really, for this Dodgers team, we're looking at October. I don't care as much. Obviously, every game matters, blah, 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 blah. We saw in 2018 that it comes down to, game 163 sometimes. But looking on paper, the Dodgers should be able to not stress about giving Lux a little bit of wiggle room early in the season, even if he did cost them a game, which, even making errors, it's unlikely an error is going to cost them the game. Even if it does, they probably have that wiggle room. So to give them space, but it will be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
You got anything else for today, Vince?
No, nothing else.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us for today. Dodgers have 2 more games here in Arizona before they head off to Korea. Tyler Glasnow is pitching on Tuesday against the Giants, I believe. And they said that the top 4 or 5 in the lineup will probably be that top 4 or 5 that we're going to see in the regular season. So it should be a fun game. The Dodgers played the Giants last week, but it got rained out, and so we really didn't get to see it. So that should be exciting. And then, before we know it, the season will be here. First the Korea part, and then the real part. We're only 17 days away, 16 days away from the home opener. So a lot of fun stuff coming up. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Especially thank you to our everydayers, those of you who are with us every weekday morning, either on the podcast or on YouTube. We really appreciate it. You can become an everydayer by watching and listening every weekday morning. You can also become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Text back and forth with us, get our thoughts on the news before you hear it on the podcast. And a lot of times stuff you won't hear on the podcast because, it's just our thoughts throughout the day. Once the season starts, there'll be more behind the scenes stuff from Vince when he's at the field, down on the field before games. So a lot of fun stuff there. Check that out at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network over on YouTube. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog. Both of our DMs are open there. You can also email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message at 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.